Hello, my name is Duncan and welcome to Back Away from the Donkey and Bath Books. And today I'm going to give you my 10 favourite reads of last year. Basically the books that I enjoyed the most. I've got 2 honourable mentions at the end, and I think last year's things, as long as I get this out in January, it counts, doesn't it? So we'll just jump straight into it, which I think is somebody else's byline from some other YouTuber. I don't know. So we start with The Warriors by Sol Ulrich, the book that was used as the basis for the film. Well, this book is a lot grimmer, a lot grimmer than the film. The film, in some ways, is almost comic book in style, but the book was originally sort of loosely based on Xenophanes. How do I sell it? Sorry, Xenophanes Anabasis, 370 BC, I think it was. So a Greek text about a bunch of mercenaries trying to fight their way out of a war-torn area to get themselves home. But I said it's a lot grimmer, very grim compared to the film. What's interesting, if you read Sol Ulrich's background, he was worked in social services and he saw lots of stuff, and he lived in a van while observing gangs before he wrote this book. In a similar way to, if you know, it's called Rumble, a Harlan Ellison book. It's also called Web of the City. I've got the Web of the City version, where Harlan Ellison actually joined a gang, basically, to do that one. Or Sol Ulrich, this was about sort of 5-10 years before, observed gangs. And this book was written as sort of a counterposition to the sort of West Side Story of happy smiley gangs, even though West Side Story is not all happy smiley, but you know, the sort of glorification of making them look polished up. So it is very, very grim. There's, unlike the film, there's a really violent sexual assault in the middle of it, which works in the basis of the book, but it is quite grim, and the descriptions are quite grim in it. But it's a well written book. I loved some of his prose. Is just really, really nice. It's weirdly not poetic, but it's very, very readable and really, really nice in there. I was considering doing a separate video on this book. I'm still 50-50 on that, where I'm going to have time to, but if anybody really wants me to, I can do. I suppose I can include it in the upcoming Filmtastic February, which I hope you all are going to be looking out for. So that is The Warriors by Sol Ulrich. It was published in, date, 1965 it was originally published, and I said it went out of publication for a bit. He was slightly consulted on the film The Warriors. I said, if you don't know, if you've never seen Walter Hill's The Warriors film, it is a great film, but it is a total utter sort of opposite to what the book is. It is more cartoonish, but I'm a big fan of the film, so as well. And if you can see the film, try to see the original cut, not the director's cut. That's my biggest advice, if you can find it. Anyway, so let's go on to number 2. My second choice is The Rise and the Fall of the Dinosaurs by Steve Brusatte, I think you can pronounce his name, He was actually from Edinburgh, I think, so, and that was written a few years ago. I noticed a few people on Goodreads that I follow have recently read this. I really enjoyed this. Who doesn't like a good dinosaur? And this is really, really well put together. It's obviously non-fiction, and it gives you, and he's a paleontologist, and it gives you like the history of dinosaurs. And what I liked about it is, normally when you read about it, you think there's like complete set zones between like the Triassic and the Jurassic periods and things like this. But it shows you how stuff slowly fades across the periods. These are just sort of artificial lines that humans are put in to sort of explain stuff. So I really, really enjoyed this. He's got one about mammals, which I've got on my list to read for this year as well. But it's really well written, like a good non-fiction book about sort of the real history of dinosaurs and how they developed. And what he does well is he explains how people discovered these things. You know, what fossils they found and where they found. And I didn't realise Eastern Europe was such a great ground for finding fossils at one point, and how footprints helped so much. And it is just a really, really enjoyable non-fiction book. I read it really quite quickly. I've used the word really too much in this description. But, yep, The Rise and the Fall of the Dinosaurs, highly recommended. Next we have The Long Loud Silence by Tucker Wilson. I've started slowly exploring Tucker Wilson's back catalogue. The Year of the Quiet Sun, first book I read, which is stunning book. Everybody should read it. I'm rereading it this year, hopefully with Gavin from Genre Reads, because I just think it's a really book, and everybody should read it. And that's got a sort of slow burn apocalypse. This one, The Long Loud Silence, was written in 1954. Obviously, The Long Loud Silence was 1970. And this is another post-apocalyptic, and good God, is it grim. Some nuclear weapons have gone off, and basically we're following this soldier who's on the wrong side of the Mississippi because a virus was released, and basically the military are cordoned off one side of the Mississippi. And he was on some drunken night out, and it's basically a story of his survival and him trying to get back across the Mississippi. It's grim, there's lots of weird implied stuff, and 1954 it is. Very, very grim book. There is a slightly updated version of it, I think, but I was reading the original. They sort of did an updated one in the 60s, just changed a couple of bits. I think it's because the war they were referencing was originally the Second World War, and I think they referenced the Vietnam War in the updated version. But if you like post-apocalyptic and you want to read some early fantastic stuff, definitely this, The Long Loud Silence. But then I'm slowly exploring Tucker Wilson. I think I might do a video later in the year if I've read enough of his stuff, just sort of rounding up some of his books, because I've read, what else did I read? The one about the immortal people. I've read about 3 or 4 of his books now anyway, and he's really quite an interesting writer. And he's got 2 first names, hasn't he, really? Wilson and Tucker. Anyway, let's go on to number 4. Next, let's go on to The Arrest by Jonathan Lethem. Jonathan Lethem. I'm a bit of a Jonathan Lethem fanboy. He could write the phone book and I'd be happy to read it, because I just adore his prose. So this one it's like post-apocalyptic. Came out just before the pandemic, which was quite sort of prolific, really, and made people think he was specifically writing about that period, but it was obviously planned way before the pandemic happened. I suppose it could be counted almost pastoral, the same way that Clifford Simak's books are. I think, was it Brian Aldiss? I may have had this discussion before, who mentioned the play sort of A Comfortable Apocalypse, describing sort of John Wyndham's Day of the Triffids, but it does feel a very sort of comforty book at some point. It's very, very slow, but this is after the arrest, and the arrest basically happened, and basically all electrical things stopped working. Things like gunpowder didn't work. We don't know why, how, what. No explanation of that at all, because that's not the point of the story. I read some reviews and people going, we want to know why this happened. That's not the point of the story. So we are following Alexander Duplessis, who is in the community of Tinderwick in Maine, and he ended up there because he was visiting his sister at the time of the arrest. He was a script doctor, and he worked with this other guy who also knew his sister, and you get some weird sort of backstory that sort of explains itself, some sort of flashbacks that explains himself, but it's him. But in the community, he's like this almost a courier. He goes around and helps people, and that's sort of his job. It's a very sort of agrarian community that everybody helps everybody else out. It feels very sort of cozy, which is where the sort of cozy apocalypse comes on. But his friend who was a script doctor, who you find out you don't think is particularly nice, turns up in a nuclear-powered car, and it's all the relations between him and this guy that's arrived, and the people, and his sister. There's a point where we see his ex-partner, which was Todd Baum, his ex-script doctor partner. They also had a story that they were writing together, like a science fiction post-apocalyptic thing. It's almost sort of threaded through this as well. There's real nods to film and books all over the place. There's one point when I'm reading it and I could feel it felt like a film, a specific film. I don't want to tell you what it is, because if you've not read it, it might give you a clue to what I was thinking. But it felt like a specific film, and I was just thinking, so is this going to go the same way? Jonathan Lethem's prose I always loved. Fortress of Solitude is one of my favourite books, which came out early 2000s. As I said, there's not a huge amount of real modern writers that I really get into, but he's a writer that I really sort of get down to. In some ways, I was going to say he reminds me of Gene Wolfe, but it doesn't really remind me of Gene Wolfe, but maybe he does. Not the same weirdness as Gene Wolfe, but I don't know. I think a writer who's got just really nice prose that you can just read all the time. I don't know. I'm not really sure what I'm talking about at the moment. So yeah, Jonathan Lethem's The Arrest. I think we all know that Richard Matheson can basically write in any genre. Famous writer, wrote I Am Legend, numerous episodes of every TV series going from The Twilight Zone. He was also the writer on the TV series of The Martian Chronicles. Just so much stuff he's written. This was written by him, Journal of Gun Years, published in the 80s. It's written as a diary form, and it caught me unawares because I read the book and I thought, well, it was okay. And then the days afterwards, the more I started thinking about it, the better I suddenly thought it was. And then I sort of went back and read snippets about it, and then I realised how cleverly it was all put together and how good it actually was. So I really loved, I think it is written from the point of we start off following Frank Leslie, who's a reporter, and it's like his writing of this. And this is meant to be Clay Hauser, who was a gunfighter, his journal, but it was left to the reporter, so he's so-called edited it, and this is the journal of Clay Hauser. And I think it starts up with a really fantastic opening line. Yeah, the first line was, Clay Hauser is dead, killed this morning in my presence. And that's how it starts. It sort of goes on from there. And he's so-called editor. If you overthink it, there is bits that don't quite match up, but it doesn't really matter. And it's like a sort of revisionist Western with the myth of the gunfighter, how fame and perception of what people are affects them, and what people's viewpoints are and what's really, really going on. I really, really enjoyed it. I know there's a few other Westerns that he wrote around about the same time, and I may look into them this year. The book is about sort of conflict between reality and perception. I know Matheson wrote a couple of other Westerns, especially around this period of time, so I think I may look those out for this year at some point, if I can, and if I have time to. So that was Journal of the Gun Years. Number 6, I think this is number 6, number 5 or number 6. Actually, number 6, yes. John Scalzi, When the Moon Hits Your Eye. One of the few times, very rare times, that I get a book on release and actually be a modern science fiction author. And it's basically about the moon turning to cheese. And this was fun. I really, really enjoyed this. There's a question going through the whole of the story is, what sort of cheese is it? Which is quite funny, and we never find out what sort of cheese it is. But he's obviously looked into the science of what would happen if the mass of the moon changed, and idea of people's reactions to it, and whether bits of moon rock people have on Earth would turn to cheese as well. But it's a very fun, very well written book, and if you want something lighter but still got a little bit of science into it, When the Moon Hits Your Eye, John Scalzi. If you've read Scalzi before, you know that he has got quite a light touch. I was thinking the other day, in some ways, at points, he reminds me of Harry Harrison. You know, he can put his hand to more serious stuff, but he's got quite a light touch in that sort of same sort of way. But so that's When the Moon Hits Your Eye by John Scalzi. Number 7, I think this was my first ever H.B. Piper. I may have read the odd short story somewhere, but not like I remember. This is Lone Star Planet. It is up on Project Gutenberg if you want to read it. It's also known as A Planet for Texans, written in 1958. Piper's work, a lot of it is in the public domain. It's all over the place. I think the rights to his work was screwed up by somebody along the way. Actually, if you look into him as a figure, he's a bit of a tragic figure. Sadly, he committed suicide, but it's really quite interesting, this story. It's basically, as it said, a planet for Texans. Lone Star. It is Texas on a planet. We follow a guy called Stephen Silk, who is basically being made the ambassador from the Solar League to the planet, the New Texas, as they call it. He got this job because he basically buggered it up, because he wrote an article that really annoyed some people. And we find out in the background it's basically because he's annoyed so many people, they literally want him to get killed. On the planet, they have this rule that you can assassinate politicians or people. You can kill them as long as there's a good reason. You've just got to prove that there's a good reason, which is quite funny. So he goes to this planet and he's trying to work out how his predecessor was killed. And people walking around with guns in their things, just like you would in the old, in our perception of the Old West. Their main export is meat from these huge animals, and literally they are rounded up using tanks. These big animals. So it's that sort of thing. But yeah, it was highly enjoyable. It's very hard to describe. Highly enjoyable. It's only really technically a novella, so it's about just over 100 pages long. So if you get a chance to read it, A Planet for Texans or Lone Star Planet, and I said it is up on Project Gutenberg. I will actually put the links below so you can go and see it if you want to. But it did encourage me. I really enjoyed the writing to pick up some more Piper that I may be dipping myself into this year. Another one available on Project Gutenberg is the Mark of Zorro by Macaulay Johnston, and I cannot believe it's taken me this long to read a Zorro book. It was written in, let's find the date on it, 1883, and it's a rip-roaring adventure set in sort of Mexican California, as most people know about this upper class guy who basically puts a mask on and helps people. I think that's what you can do. But I really enjoyed this. I remember watching Zorro. I think it was the Disney Zorros that were produced in the late 60s, and they were broadcast on UK TV sort of summer holidays from school in the sort of late 70s, and I remember watching those and enjoying those. But this said it was a rip-roaring sort of adventure type yarn, well written. Didn't feel its age. A couple of points it did, but didn't feel age. It felt quite modern in the way it was written. It's also under the name The Prince of Capistrano, I think, as well. But weirdly, at the end, there shouldn't be a continuation of the Zorro, but there is more Zorro books because he continued it in another way. But I need to read some more. Definitely need to read some more Zorro, and it really surprised me. So if you've not read it, it's worth dipping. I will put a link along with the other one to Gutenberg where you can just download it and say, if you've got, they said it's easy read, nice quick read, and it's well worth it. So that is The Mark of Zorro. Next one was part of the Make Me Love Arthur C. Clarke thread of stories I was doing, and I think I might change their name to I Love Arthur C. Clarke now. This was Earthlight, written in 1955, and I mentioned before, Arthur C. Clarke used to be one of these authors I always thought that I should like, but I never really sort of got on with works, but I've started to get into him. As always with this one, the science feels really spot on, and it's about the moon in what we believe 200 years in the future, so it'd be sort of 22nd century from when the story was written, which was 1955. And the Earth and the moon are sort of in a slight sort of political conflict. The moon is sort of ended up a jumping off point to the outer planets, and a federation of outer planets that want to take control of the moon, and then Earth wants to control the moon, and the moon wants to control itself. We follow an accountant who's also basically a secret agent of Earth who's trying to find out who a spy is who's been handing material across, and it's not, as with most Clarke, it's not all not big action pieces. There's a bit of conflict at the end that is resided, not the word I'm looking for, is sorted out in a way that feels very sort of Asimovian, sort of Isaac Asimov. Wouldn't look out of place in an Isaac Asimov story. But yes, you're following the main guy as he's sort of exploring possible possible spies, and he's questioning people, and in that way you learn the function, how the moon functions. As you expect with Clarke, his science is on par, and it feels very real. So that was Earthlight. I really enjoyed that. I said it was probably I read 3 or 4 Clarkes last year. Probably it is my favourite one I read last year. Number 10 is Pandora in the Congo by Albert Sanchez Pinol, who's a Spanish writer. It's part of my Alternative Visions sort of thread of things of translated fiction that I've just started. So there'll probably be a piece about this in that, where it'll be by itself. Or we follow Tommy Thompson, who is the ghostwriter of a ghostwriter of a ghostwriter. He might be of a ghostwriter again. And he's asked to interview and tell the story of, I'm trying to think of his name, I've got it written down over here, Marcus Garvey, who stumbled out of the jungle in 1914 after being on a failed mining expedition with the Carver brothers, and the Carver brothers are dead. They put him in prison, and it's telling his story. So you're having Jameson interviewing him and slowly pulling the story out of him, and then you're having Jameson's reactions, and it's trying to work out what's real and what's not. It's a very sort of pastiche in the sort of style of all the adventure stories like H. Rider Haggard and Conan Doyle of the sort of late Victorian period and sort of early century books, and it is, trying to work out what is real, what's not, which version of the story is real and what works. I really enjoyed it. My only complaint is I think they could have shortened down the middle section just a wee bit, but it is really, really interesting read. The translation is excellent. If you want to know, it makes it read well. So that's Pandora in the Congo. Well worth a read. And I said I'll probably be mentioning this when I do my sort of update on my alternative visions. So now we're going to have a couple of sort of quick honourable mentions. And the first one is The Duel by Joseph Conrad. And this is the film, the sort of novella that The Duelist, Ridley Scott's film, was made from. And that is well worth read. I've got a video coming out on that. And I'm probably going to put it out for Filmtastic February, because I've been planning on doing this since I finished it, which was about November. So that's my first one. And my second one was Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. For some reason, taking me this long to read. It's a story that I always thought I'd read, and I realised I'd not read it. Because I read Albert Verne. I know I read loads of Albert Verne, but for some reason I'd never read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And it's everything in respect to Verne. A really sort of rip-roaring adventure with some really good ideas, and the translation good. I said nobody ever mentions translations of Verne's work, but they always seem to be really, really well done. So that's my two honourable mentions. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I've sort of summed up vaguely what I read and why I liked them. I'm probably going to have a quick video of my least liked ones of last year, which will probably be a slightly quicker video, because if I didn't like something, I'm not going to say huge amounts about them. Just vague reason why I didn't like them. Doesn't mean they were bad books. It means that I just didn't get on with them. So I will speak to you all very soon, and keep an eye out for some other videos. And remember, Filmtastic February is coming up. I'm pushing it this year. Anyway, I will speak to you soon. Bye for now.